Hello, you've reached Joyce Barnett's channel again, and today we're going to talk about what not to do when your home is listed on the market for sale. Okay, so let's get into it. Alrighty, so the first thing that you do not want to do is to follow the realtor around during an open house. Now, I've seen this and had this happen to me many times, and I try to tell people you need to leave during an open house. And sometimes some people do not listen and they stay in the home during the open house to keep you company. And then every time a buyer comes through the house, they're walking around telling the buyer all about their house. And what happens is you end up coming off as very desperate to the buyer. So if you were out and you were shopping for a home, do you want the seller following you around into every room, talking to you and trying to sell you the house? So it kind of defeats the purpose of having a real estate agent if a seller is wandering around while the buyer is looking at the house during an open house and talking to them. So you come off as desperate, and it kind of defeats the purpose of having a real estate agent. So please do not do that. It's the worst thing that you can do is be home during the open house and following them around. Also, if you have pets, a dog, try to remove the dog. Take the dog for a walk. Take the pet with you. Do not leave the pet in the house, because again, it's the pet is going to distract people. And if the dog, let's say the dog gets out, it's not supposed to, or there's a cat there and it gets out, what happens is then there's a big fiasco going on where, the realtor, the listing agent's chasing the animal around to try to get it back into the house, which is not a good situation. Okay, the next thing is boxes. A lot of times people want to put a bunch of stuff in boxes, but they stack it inside their house. It's just going to look cluttered. And even though you are moving, put the boxes in the garage or in a closet or somewhere where people can't see it. And I've had that happen to me before. I had a listing one time where the seller stacked boxes up to almost the ceiling, and I kept telling her, you need to get rid of the boxes. Well, I don't have anywhere to put them, she said. Well, get a storage unit or whatever. If you don't have room, buy a storage unit and put the boxes in a storage unit, because boxes that are stacked up in your house when your home's on the market is an eyesore to a buyer, and it just looks cluttery, and it's gonna take away from the beauty of your house and the buyer seeing the house as a place to live and not a storage unit. Letting people in the house that do not have an appointment with a realtor. So they sometimes buyers have a tendency where they see a house on the market and they knock on your door wanting to see the house. That's the worst thing you can do, is let one of those people in your house. For one thing, you don't know who they are. You don't even know if they're pre-qualified. They may not even be able to afford to buy a house. Maybe they're just some nosy person that wants to see inside your house. Or they could be a weirdo. So you never want to let somebody in your house that knocks on the door. If they're not accompanied by a real estate agent with an appointment, you do not want to let them in your house. All right. So seller beware. Do not just let anybody in your house to look at your house. Make sure they are accompanied by a real estate professional. Okay, next thing. Being paranoid that the house isn't selling, and sitting there and being all frustrated and picking on the realtor and saying, well, wow, how come my house isn't selling, this and that. Basically, houses, the reason they don't sell is usually because they're overpriced. So you may want to schedule price reductions on the house after so many weeks on the market. And remember, when a house is sitting on the market and it's not selling, the longer it stays on the market, the more buyers are reluctant to look at the house because they think that there might be something wrong with the house. So The quicker the house sells, definitely the higher price you're going to get. And it's a good idea to price the house right in the beginning, then do overprice it, and then be chasing the market down, which means that you have to keep lowering your price because your house isn't selling. When your realtor does a market analysis, pay attention to what has sold in the area. Try not to overprice your house. Because once you overprice it, then you're going to be sitting on the market, and then you're going to have to do scheduled price reductions to get your house sold, which is, again, not going to get you top dollar, because then you're going to be on the market a lot longer. Not clearing clutter out of your house and personal items such as photos in frames, you know, a buyer has to see themselves as living there. So if a buyer's walking through your house and they just see a bunch of family photos all over the place, then what happens is the buyer is turned off and they can't picture themselves in the house. So you got to have the mindset that you are selling the house and that you're going to clear clutter out. You're going to clear all your personal stuff out. If you have a collection of baseball cards or whatever, all your little collections that buyers are not going to like, or let's say, you have a deer head up on the wall. A lot of people don't like that. You want to take that stuff and put it in a storage unit, put it in your garage. You're going to be moving anyway, so put it in there, and then again, clear the clutter. I always try to tell people, take 2/3 of stuff down and keep 1/3 of stuff up. So you want to make sure the house shows decluttered and open, so that it shows nice and open and not packed in, because it's going to show smaller if you have a lot of stuff packed in and not have enough open space. Even though you may like to cook, cooking smelly stuff on the stove right before a showing is going to turn a buyer off, because they come walking in and all of a sudden they're like, "Ooh, what's that smell?" And it's a lot of times it lingers. If you're cooking fish or cooking something that kind of has an odor, then that's gonna stay with the buyer. Smelly homes don't sell. So you want to try to not cook smelly stuff right before a showing. Try to keep your cooking for after the house is shown. Unless you're baking cookies, that could actually go in your favor. But other than that, if it's something that is kind of a yucky smell, do not cook before a showing. Being present when the buyer's looking at the house for a showing. It's always a good idea to leave the house when you know the house is being shown. And if you have a dog, take the dog with you. Go for a walk and get out of there. The worst thing you can do is be home for showings, because buyers are turned off to that. And buyers are not going to talk to their realtor and tell them if they like the house or what they don't like when you're home, because they don't want to say something that is going to offend you. So they don't feel comfortable while you're in the house. So if you're a seller, you want to leave during the showings. Do not stay in the house during the showings. And I've had people where they stayed in the house, they walk around, and they're nosy. They walk around and they're acting like they think they're the realtor and they're going to tell the buyer all about the house and blah blah blah. And a lot of times it turns the buyers off, and it puts you in the position where you start looking like you're desperate and anxious, and that's the worst position that you can be in when you're selling your house. You don't want to come off as anxious and desperate, because then you will get lower offers on your house if you do that. Okay, so last but least is probably the most important thing when selling a home, is to disclose everything you know about the house to the buyer on the transfer disclosure statement. Now, I've had people that thought, well, we don't really want to disclose this to a buyer because they may not like the house. But legally, you have to disclose any pertinent fact that could cause the buyer to maybe not want to buy your property or to think twice about buying your house. So let's say you have a neighbor's dog that barks all the time. That's something you have to disclose. If there's any noisy stuff going on in the neighborhood, you're supposed to disclose that. And or if there's a lawsuit with the HOA, or there's an assessment coming up with the HOA, not even if there's an assessment, but if they're talking about an assessment, if the HOA has been talking about doing an assessment for many months and you know about it, that's something you have to disclose. Any leaks, anything wrong with the property, and any repairs or anything that you've done to the property, you need to disclose all that's to the buyer. It's on the transfer disclosure statement, which you will go through with your realtor, and it asks a whole bunch of questions. So you need to disclose everything you know about the property. And actually what happens is when you do disclose everything, a buyer is more apt to purchase your home because they think, wow, they disclosed all this. That means they're not hiding something. So when there's nothing on the transfer disclosure, a lot of times buyers think, that's kind of weird. How come, they've lived there for 10 years, but there's nothing to disclose? They start thinking that somebody's hiding something from them. And so then they get a little paranoid. So it's always good to disclose anything that you know about the property and don't try to hide it. I had one client that tried to hide stuff, and which I told her, why are you trying to hide stuff? Just disclose it. And she was paranoid about stuff that she had, there were different things that happened, leaking, and different things that she was trying to hide. So you never want to do that when you're selling your house. You always want to disclose everything you know about the property to the buyer. And especially if you don't want a lawsuit later on coming back on you, because what a lot of people do is they will sue for for a seller hiding a pertinent defect or something that they did to the property to the buyer. And if the buyer finds out later on that you were hiding it, it could be considered fraud, and you could be slapped with a lawsuit later on. So there's no statute of limitations when it comes to fraud, and fraud is trying to hide any pertinent fact or information to a buyer. So anyway, please like and subscribe to my video, and I appreciate you watching the video. And again, why listen to me? Because I have 35 years experience selling real estate. That's why. And so please follow me and like my videos. And if you want to learn more about real estate, that is what I'm here for, is to help you. And thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.